This big brother Zephaniah Yehoiakim from SLT School of Truth. Obadiah 1. The destruction of Edom. The vision of Obadiah. Thus said the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. You see that? The Most High said, arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Arise ye. So now we need to see who this Edom is.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. You know, I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my end.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
On this earth, and then in the world we can't see.
And if they take everything away from me, it wouldn't fucking matter. Artists be too concerned about their well-being sometimes. Artists be too scared to stand up for something. They scared to lose their fucking house. Or they scared to lose their record deal. I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal. few toys like a Happy Meal.
You're doing really well now, but didn't you release a CD like almost 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I released a gospel record when I was 15 because I grew up in, a household where all I ever did was listen to gospel music, and my parents are both traveling ministers, and so I kind of sang about, what was going on in my life at 15, and that's how I got introduced to the music industry. I swear I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music,
Yeah.
but it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil.
I had to ask some friends because I was hearing a lot about her, and so they told me, who she was and what she was doing. And I come from the school of thought there's just some things that the public just shouldn't know. You know what I'm saying? Like things that happen between two people, a wife and a husband, girl. I just don't think that it's for mass consumption. I just have always felt that way, and I just think that the whole idea of celebrity and fame has become really convoluted and, kind of bastardized, like whereas fame used to be the byproduct of success, and now it's the ultimate goal. And if your ultimate goal is to be famous, then you're going to do a lot to get there, like sign your name in blood in a contract with the devil. Like you're going to end up on a one-way street and it's going nowhere. Like that's just the truth. I've seen so many people like forsake their moral code and their value systems just for a little bit of fame, and it's not worth it at the end of the day. It's really not.
Roman is a crazy boy who lives in me, and he says the things that I don't want to say. He was born, just a few months ago. I think he was born out of rage. He was conceived in rage, so he bashes everyone. He threatens to beat people, and he's violent.
That must be nice to have like an ignorant loudmouth who you can just sort of blame every...
He wants to be blamed. I don't want to blame him. I ask him to leave, but he can't. He's here for a reason. People have brought him out. People conjured him up. Now he won't leave.
Around the same time that John D. Rockefeller seized U.S. media, he also hijacked U.S. medicine. When it was discovered that drugs could be produced from petroleum, America's top oil mogul ordered his army of propagandists to invert reality accordingly. Medicines used for thousands of years were suddenly classified as alternative, while the new, petroleum-based, highly addictive, and patentable drugs were declared the gold standard. After buying a German pharmaceutical company that manufactured chemicals of war for Adolf Hitler, Rockefeller leveraged his political influence by pressing Congress to declare natural healing modalities unscientific quackery. Rockefeller then took control of the American Medical Association and began offering massive grants to top medical schools under the mandate that only his approved curriculum be taught. Any mention of the healing powers of herbs, plants, influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
Media allies, but his confidence that his words would not leave the room was later broken.
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and restricted their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government.
That these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire...
You see that? The Most High said, arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Arise ye. So now we need to see who this Edom is.
We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems, and supply chains will be deeply affected.
We're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
There's an overwhelming consensus that nothing worked. Nothing could work, nothing did work, and nothing will work. That includes the vaccinations, which are not just unnecessary, experimental, untested, and are actually killing people. I want to take this moment to point a finger directly at the principal cause of why we're all here today. And it's not the government. No, it's us physicians, who are being intimidated by our colleges, both provincially and internationally. If physicians had not been intimidated by the very body that's supposed to protect you from me, if they'd been allowed to speak their mind without the threat of losing their income and their positions, then an individual patient, such as you and me in a closed examining room, would have been told the truth. The truth. They have been denied that ability to do that. We have had that for centuries. The two principal medical ethics have been trampled on by this government. First, do no harm, and informed consent. First, do no harm has been trampled on. The mandates have killed, as we've heard, more people, many more people than they've saved. But informed consent, I would put it to you, how can you give informed consent if you are not informed? And you have been denied information intentionally by the colleges that are supposed to protect you. So I say this, putting a point on it. The colleges of physicians and surgeons across this country and internationally are co-conspirators with government in state-sanctioned murder.
Did you hear a loud boom earlier today? Several people heard and felt a loud noise around 12:30 Central Time this afternoon. News Channel 7's Tyler Allender joins us live in the studio. And Tyler, is any word on what it was?
Ron, with Tyndall, Eglin, and NSA Panama City nearby, we're no stranger to loud booms from time to time. This particular one seems to be a mystery, though, but I heard and felt it.
crazy, man. Where's that noise coming from?
A Brazilian reporter bragged of his vaccine status and got his third vaccine and then was taken to the hospital. He passed out on air and had 5 cardiac arrests. Was talking about how great his vaccine was, passed out on live camera doing it, and has now had 5 cardiac arrests since.
People are actually hacking the system. People are, like they're creating fake vaccine cards. They're also getting vaccine exemptions by telling their doctor that they're allergic to PEG, which is PEG. It's polyethylene glycol. It's a component of the mRNA vaccines. The ones that don't have PEG have polysorbate, which has cross, reaction with PEG. So people who are allergic to PEG are often allergic to polysorbate. And this is just, it's so ridiculous that people have to go to these lengths in America to avoid an experimental drug trial.
A Kaiser study found a much higher rate of myocarditis with a peak in males age 18 to 24 at a rate of 537 per million, far greater than 67 per million estimated by the CDC. So it's the same thing. They're not being fully honest and transparent about the numbers. And why would they? They've all got stock in Pfizer. They want to sell these things off the shelves. They want to make themselves rich and powerful. They want to bring in the medical tyranny. And so we're all here. And now they're coming after the kids. That's the ultimate sin.
If you're not doing something now, it's already too late. So we got together and said, what can we do to make the biggest impact? Obviously, the soil is deficient. People are hungry for the truth. And with socialized media, with all the, right now, we've got even reports now that there's certain cell phone companies that are not allowing for text messages from, let's just say, alternative networks out there to come out. So we said, how do we beat them at their own game? Well, let's play by the rules. Let's buy a radio station. We're in the process right now of purchasing a TV program, a TV network that we can put on OTT, because people are hungry for the truth. Oh, and we've had over 70 million hits on our website, 70 million hits in 6 months. I think that's a pretty good indication that people are hungry for the truth. That's why you guys have always been a beacon for the truth at InfoWars, right? And so we've got to get out and do something. Massive action is what we have to do. We want to create the future that we want to see. And not only do we need to have this as a vehicle to tell people the truth now, but we got to make sure, because the ship is sinking and we're winning. We are winning in a big way. But Owen, we got to make sure that we hit this so hard that we never let this type of problem ever happen again, as long as we're alive and and future generations to come.
The game of football itself is more dangerous than COVID. Literally. The game. So, I mean, we should ban the sport of football because there's more life-altering injuries that happen in a game of football than football players actually getting COVID and having life-altering injuries. It was just this weird thing that kind of hit me in the face, just the total insanity of the world. The game of football more dangerous than COVID.
When I saw that, what freaked me out the most about it was sent out across the country by none other than the Associated Press. People forget that the way that media works in the mainstream is every morning about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, a group of stories comes across the Associated Press, and the news anchors literally read the news. They don't even, it's almost like Ron Burgundy. I mean, Ron Burgundy has a lot in common with Joe Biden. They just read whatever's on the teleprompter. Whatever's out there, they're going to read. And that's what's happening. This is crazy. And they are blatantly messing with us.
Fauci is honestly, if he wasn't responsible for so much suffering all across this country and all across the world, then he would just be pathetic. You know, because he's there like some tyrannical little dictator demanding action. And he keeps saying over and over again, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And she's so wrong about everything, hoping that the more you repeat it, the more true it becomes.
How is this not a major story? Record drug overdoses, record homicides, and all of it in Democrat-run cities, and the media won't talk about it because they're too busy fear-mongering and profiting off of COVID, a man-made virus by Fauci that they cover. Hundreds of thousands of citizens in the streets climbing on top of tanks in an attempt to commandeer them. And, of course, this just plays into the bigger phenomenon of citizens around the world protesting the medical fascistic tyranny that we're being subjected to because of COVID, and how these protests are starting to get more violent now as the response to them is getting more violent and as the tyranny is getting worse. He quoted KKK Grand Wizard Robert Byrd, "Senate rules must be changed to reflect changed circumstances." Put plainly by Senator Byrd, Congress is not obliged to be bound by the dead hand of the past, said Schumer. Dude has caused so much vaccine hesitancy and misinformation, and he doesn't even have the balls to stand by the crap he preaches. Oh, I'd love to see Ethan Klein go on the Rogan podcast and say that. I'd love to see the fat blob, Ethan Klein, say that to Joe Rogan's face. He never would because he's the coward.
When you have a society that has become decoupled from each other and has free-floating anxiety and a sense that things don't make sense, we can't understand it. And then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis. They literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere.
Mass psychosis, also known as group mind, mob mentality, or herd mentality. Before modern civilization, we lived in herds, and in order to survive in the herd, we conformed to the herd. This is where mass psychosis all stems from. The most popular examples of explaining mass psychosis are typically angry mobs and violent riots, but these are merely the end results. Mass psychosis begins when the individual mind starts to identify as a member of a group based on any unifying factor. The unifying factor doesn't even need to make sense. For many people, the feeling of unity is enough. Our ego mind innately craves acceptance, and by default, will instinctively conform to whatever group it perceives to be the majority. In order to successfully conform to the group, the individual must put aside personal intuition and follow the guidance of the group. This makes a person highly controllable and spiritually stifles the individual, which causes them to crave group acceptance even more. Man's disposition for mass psychosis has been written about for millennia, most notably in ancient scripture and philosophy. And we all experience this as human beings, whether we reflect upon it or not. Plato argued that due to the nature of group mind, democracy always leads to tyranny and subjugation. His concern was the lack of good leadership, and philosophized on ways of solving this. In 1895, Gustave Le Bon published The Crowd, wherein he explains the key processes for cultivating mass psychosis: anonymity, contagion, and suggestibility. This work is known to have influenced world leaders, businesses, and tyrants, of which the ethics has been written about for decades. And yet, AP and Reuters outrageously claim that mass psychosis does not exist, when it is in fact the corporate media apparatus to which they belong that makes this all possible, waging psychological warfare against a group of the population who believes the media would never lie to them. This is why the term mass psychosis is arguably a better term than group mind or mob mentality. A change in the field of consciousness occurs, a devolution from divine inspiration into primitive hierarchy, which has no place in a civilized society. And yet, here we are. Without mass psychosis, today's leaders would have no power. Just like advertising, everything about politics is about cultivating mass psychosis. Whereas the individual pursuit of happiness has inevitably led to beauty and innovation, creating and controlling groups of people, which has been the biggest power play on Earth for all of recorded history, almost always leads to death and destruction. The science and study of mass psychosis could be used to enlighten humanity by educating the individual about the power and potential of the human mind. But today, the very same corrupt media being used by wealthy elites to divide and enslave us says there is no such thing as mass psychosis. Mass psychosis is humanity's burden to outgrow. It is why we accept the lesser of two evils. Many of us are well aware of the frailty of man and the civilized world. The great psychologist Carl Jung's warning to the world was that the individual must come face to face with their own shadow. In order to accomplish this, one must liberate themselves from the collective. And until enough of us do, society will continue to be led by tyrants and ignorant mobs.